Mega Man 2. If there was a Mega Man game that everyone knew about besides maybe the original X, it's this one. Mega Man 2 is not only considered one of the most well-known games in the franchise, but also one of the most well-known on the NES, to the point that it was one of the games included on the NES Mini, and why the last ever issue of Nintendo Power put it as the 6th greatest game to be put on a Nintendo console. Which is why it might be interesting for some people to find out that this game almost didn't happen. Despite being a decent game, the original Mega Man didn't sell too well. As such, there was a bit of a disagreement between the game's director, Akira Kitamura, and its producer, Takuro Fujiwara. As such, Kitamura actually went to Capcom's vice president at the time in order to try to get the sequel greenlit. Capcom approved of it, but only if the development team worked on other projects at the same time. Keiji Inafune was even brought back to work on the game despite the fact that he was working on a completely different game at the time. Inafune has gone on record to say that Mega Man 2 was the most notable game he had worked on by saying it was both the most fun game and the most stressful to work on. The added stress was because Inafune, in his second year, was also forced to mentor a new employee while working on the game. While developing the game, the designers took some of the unused content from the first game and put it into the second. But they didn't use everything, and even if they did, it wouldn't have been nearly enough to fill the game. As such, the designers actually asked fans for submissions via a contest, and they received over 8,000 submissions. All they did was clean up the winning designs to make them, in Inafune's own words, more anime-esque, and boom, they were done. This contest was so popular that they actually decided to do this for later games in the series as well. While Mega Man 1 came out on December 12, 1987, Mega Man 2 came out on Christmas Eve of 1988. So, how did the team do with a game that took such little time to make, and only doing so in their spare time? Well, let's take a look. So the game actually begins by giving us some backstory to the game. Mega Man beat Dr. Wily in the events of the last game, but now Wily has returned, and this time, he created 8 of his own Robot Masters, so it's up to Mega Man to take him down. And yes, you heard that right, there are now 8 Robot Masters in this game for Mega Man to defeat. And after the text is finished, we scroll up the building to see Mega Man on the top with his helmet off. I should mention that the original title is Rockman 2, The Mystery of Dr. Wily. Yeah, no, I wasn't going to read the Japanese and end up butchering a language I don't know how to speak, and I'm certainly not going to refer to this game as anything other than Mega Man 2 for the fact that I am not Japanese. Besides, do you really want me to waste more of your time by saying the full title of the game when no one even uses the subtitle when referring to it? I didn't think so. One of the things you'll notice is that the game actually has 2 difficulty settings, normal and difficult. Normal, however, wasn't in the original game. It's not really that much different since all your attacks in normal do twice as much damage as in difficult. As such, I chose difficult because why not at this point? The game also features a password system. After every stage, you can choose to get a password so that you can continue where you left off if you need to. Once we start the game, we can finally choose which stage to go after. And, let's be honest, there's really only one proper choice for which Robot Master to start with. Let's go, Metal Man! Once we enter the stage proper, we can see that there's no longer a point system. In addition, we'll later see that health and weapon pickups look differently than they did in the first game. Metal Man's stage has the gimmick of having conveyor belts in various locations, and right at the start of the level, we can find something new to the game, the Energy Tank, or E-Tank for short. E-Tanks are helpful little pickups that you can store and then use later to restore your health. There's nothing in this level that's really considered annoying like in a lot of the stages from the first game. The little hallway before the boss is no longer filled with enemies, so that's helpful. Metal Man himself isn't too terribly difficult. He'll run in place as a conveyor belt tries to move you around. If you get too close, he'll jump to the opposite side like Bomb Man did, but he'll throw a metal blade at you that's hard to dodge if that happens, so try not to do that. If you attack him, he'll jump and throw anywhere from 1 to 3 metal blades at you depending on how high he jumps. The best strategy is to just let the conveyor belt push you away from Metal Man, fire once, dodge the blade in the process, and fire at him before he lands. Trust me, that's easier than it sounds. If the belt is trying to push you towards Metal Man, just run away and jump over the blade he throws at you when he gets impatient until the belt changes back. Upon defeating a boss in this game, you're actually told which weapon you get in this case, which is good for those who played the first game and might not have known you get a weapon after beating a boss. Once you beat Metal Man, you get the most broken weapon ever made in the series, the Metal Blade. Do I even have to explain why this thing is broken? You probably already know. I do? Damn contractual obligations. Alright, the Metal Blade is a powerful saw blade weapon that Mega Man will fire. There are some enemies that aren't affected by it, but those that are will suffer a quick death as this thing is incredibly powerful, can fire in all 8 possible directions you can throw a weapon, can actually be rapid fired if you're using a turbo controller, and uses up very little ammo. You have 28 bars of energy for both your health and ammo. It takes 4 Metal Blades to even use one of these ammo bars. This means you can use 112 Metal Blades max, and that's not counting if you get any weapon energy pickups or use a glitch. Once you get this thing, the game is pretty much over, as you can tear through mostly anything in your way, or get weapons that will be the weakness of other Robot Masters very easily. So let's continue onward. The next Robot Master I tend to go after is Bubble Man. This is the first level in the series to have water physics, which makes it rather annoying at times. It has your standard water level trappings, lower gravity, spikes that are placed in a way that you have to be oh so careful with your jumps or else you get insta-killed, and enemies that can move around freely in the water and do so in annoying ways, thus making it harder to hit them. Probably the most annoying section of this stage is right here with the lanternfish. You have to hit the bulb on its head while it spawns these annoying shrimp enemies called shrinks, and the bulb takes so many hits. There are actually 2 of these, but the worst is the second one, which is in a room filled with death spikes. Although, this annoying jumping section where you can't jump too high or you're dead, and this waterfall crossing section with these crab enemies known as claws, or snappers, do give that second fish a run for his money. Bubble Man, by comparison, is much easier, especially since the Metal Blade just tears through him, even on difficult. He throws these bubbles at you and tries to fire shots at you to distract you, and then he'll swim over to the side you're on, though he'll be higher up than you, so just aim the Metal Blade up and you're pretty much able to kill him in like 15 seconds. Defeating him nets you the Bubble Lead, a small projectile that travels along the ground. That last part will come in handy later. Next stage on the list is Heat Man, and I've got some problems with this guy. Heat Man stage isn't really too bad, but it does have one of the more annoying enemy types in the series, the Telly. Tellies are small, constantly respawning enemies that love to chase you down and get in the way. They're annoying, hard to hit, and just are not fun to deal with. But on top of that, this is the game's Yoku block stage. Yeah, those disappearing, reappearing blocks from the last game, they're back, and in this stage, they're arguably even worse than they were in Iceman stage, as there are 3 different parts of this stage where they appear. The first one isn't too bad, but it's the other 2 where it becomes a problem. There are these small little walls that you have to try and jump over, but some are a bit too high for Mega Man to reach under his own power. As such, you have to jump on these blocks while Tellies are spawning. And then there's the third section, where you have to jump across a long string of Yoku blocks while going across a pool of magma and a pit of death. It's very difficult and just a huge pain in the ass. And at the end, you deal with the returning Sniper Joe, which acts like a Big Eye in its first form, but then when you destroy the walker, becomes a Sniper Joe enemy, which in the last game was only seen in Bomb Man stage. Oh, and if you're on the ground when the first form lands, it'll fire at you several times, so be aware of that. After all that, He-Man himself is extremely easy, even if you're not using the Bubble Lead. He's sort of the opposite of a Robot Master we'll see in a later game. His main attack has him throwing embers at you. They're tricky to avoid, but not that big of an issue. Just hit him once, and he'll become temporarily invincible before barreling towards you. Jump over the stream of fire, and then hit him once he reforms, and do this over and over until he's dead. The Bubble Lead just simply gets rid of him faster. But as one last screw you from He-Man, his weapon is absolutely awful. The atomic fire is really powerful, don't get me wrong, but it's incredibly unwieldy. In order to use it, you have to charge up the attack, but the more you charge, the more ammo it consumes, and it takes a long time to fully charge it. You can't even use 2 fully charged atomic fire shots before you're forced to use weaker shots, and with the weaker shots, if you charge for too long, the weapon fires on its own. The only enemy I even somewhat recommend using this to fight against is the next Robot Master on the list, Woodman. Woodman's stage is rather decent. Just like Metal Man's stage, there's nothing here that actually annoys me. The closest thing is the hot dog mini-bosses. Named so because they literally shoot fire out of their mouths, which seems like a bad idea in a forest stage, but whatever. This is also the first stage in the series to feature the appearance of the Baton, aka the Bubble Bat. Woodman himself is kind of annoying since his leaves actually make him completely invincible by deflecting everything. But if you time the atomic fire right, he goes down pretty easily. If the atomic fire doesn't kill him, just sling some metal blades at him to finish him off. Weird how the robot that's not even made out of metal has been the most annoying one so far, isn't it? His weapon, the Leaf Shield, isn't the greatest weapon. It does stop a lot of things that come into contact with it, but if you move at all besides turning around, the Leaf Shield goes flying off, and you only have like 7 shots with it, so you need to make them count. This is the first of the many shield weapons the series gives us, most of which are terrible. The next Robot Master on the list is probably the... Wait. Do you guys hear something? Oh no. Oh no. I know that sound. Oh, for fuck. Why am I not surprised this showed up? Yes, Airman is our next boss, and he has a meme around him based on a fan song somebody made about struggling to fight him. Why are they fighting Airman specifically? Because they're having trouble with the Yoku block section I mentioned to you with Heatman stage. Defeating certain bosses nets you not only their weapon, but also specific items made by Dr. Light. Item 1 is a platform with a propeller underneath that can be used to give the player an extra foothold. Item 2 is a board Mega Man can stand on that will rocket forward until it hits a wall or goes off screen. And Item 3 is a wall climbing item that lets you get some vertical distance when you can't use Item 1. You can use Item 2 to get across the annoying Yoku section, but you have to beat Airman to do so since Airman gives you Item 2. And yeah, the song does sort of have a point. Airman's stage has a lot of precision platforming and surprises in it, including the infamous Pippi enemy. Pippies are annoying as they can drop eggs onto the ground, releasing a bunch of their young, which are small and hard to hit, making them annoying. Thankfully, destroying the egg before it hits you or the ground keeps the younglings from spawning, or you can just tear through said younglings with the metal blade. There are also these large blocks that appear out of nowhere when you get close enough. If you stand on them, these little enemies called gremlins will spawn, but these drills will start to raise once these platforms appear, going back down once they've reached maximum length. So you have to stay on the platform until the drills go down so you can cross without getting hurt and possibly being knocked into the bottomless pit below. Airman himself is kind of annoying, but he's still rather easy to handle all things considered, especially with the Leaf Shield. Airman will spawn some blue tornadoes in a specific pattern before blowing them, and you, in the opposite direction of him. You can avoid some of these tornadoes, but not all of them. After 3 sets of tornadoes, Airman will hop over to the opposite side. At this point, start spamming the Leaf Shield and he'll go down quick. I guess those leaves clog up his fans or something. Next up is Crashman, and if you thought the telly spam was bad in Heatman stage, get ready because there are a ton of screens in this level that are nothing but telly spam. Thankfully, tellies are limited to how many can be on screen at a time. This stage features these weird platforms that are sort of an evolution of the platforms in Gutsman stage, only these loop around on a track rather than just going back and forth. They also don't intentionally drop you, which is good. This is a good way to show off what the Leaf Shield can do to tellies. Later on in the stage, we see the evolution of what's arguably Mega Man's mascot enemy, the Met. These enemies also first appeared in Gutsman stage in the last game, but they can at least walk in this stage. Mets are invincible until they pop their head up, and they're pretty cute. Crashman himself has a very easy to exploit AI. He won't do anything until you press the fire button, save for run back and forth. Once you fire, he'll jump in the air and attempt to blow you up with these sticky bombs. This is where the air shooter comes in. The air shooter is kind of unwieldy since it only really works against enemies above and in front of you, and it's not that strong of an attack. So, since Crashman jumps to attack and jumps whenever you fire, you can use the air shooter's pattern to tag him. Just keep spamming it until he's dead and you're good to go. Crashman's weapon, the Crash Bomber, is a powerful attack. It explodes on contact with enemies and can stick to walls to explode after a few seconds. But you only have 7 shots with it, so make them count if you can. The next Robot Master to challenge is Flashman. You know what we really need right now, even though we don't? A level with ice physics! I'm sure glad that Flashman's here to do that. This stage is sort of maze-like as you have to navigate around until you get to the exit. In one section, you can use the Crash Bomber to destroy these walls, which makes things a little easier on you and can get you to a few otherwise inaccessible areas. In the last section before the boss hallway, there are returning Sniper Joes along the bottom, but if you can stick to the top, you'll be fine. Just destroy one more wall with the Crash Bomber and be prepared to fight Flashman. With Flashman, you can actually juggle him by hitting him with his weakness, the Metal Blade. Flashman's boss room has uneven terrain, and every so often he'll freeze you in place before sending a rapid-fire barrage towards you with his arm cannon. But get rid of him, and you get the Time Stopper. The weapon does pretty much what it says on the tin. It completely stops time, but you only have 1 shot to use it, and you can't attack or switch weapons when doing so. Time to go after the last Robot Master. I just realized that's a pun, god damn it. And it's arguably the most frustrating of the 8 to deal with. Quickman stage and fight are easily the worst of the Robot Master stages in this game, bar none. It is one that requires being quick and having precise jumps, or else you will die. And it all revolves around these things! These force beams are instant death if Mega Man comes into contact with them. And they come out quick, so if you slip up once, you're going back to the last checkpoint in the stage. If not back to the beginning of the stage itself. There are actually 2 of these shafts that you have to deal with, and the first one is slightly easier because you have a bit more time to get through. There's also a section in between where you have to navigate through the dark while fighting hotheads, red enemies that actually throw tackle fires from Fireman stage at you, but that's nowhere near as difficult as the force beam shoots. Now, you can use the Time Stopper if you want to pass the force beams, but it's actually better to save the Time Stopper if you can, because you're gonna need it to deal with Quickman. Fighting Quickman can be incredibly annoying because he is very fast and he can hit like a truck. He also has no set pattern that I can think of other than that he will jump 2 to 3 times, sometimes throw his boomerangs at you, and then run until he hits a wall. If you use the Time Stopper, you drain away half of Quickman's health regardless of what difficulty you're on. Though how that happens, I don't know. Another trick is to use the Crash Bomber and hope the explosion catches Quickman multiple times, because it does a decent chunk of damage to him. If and when you defeat Quickman, you get the Quick Boomerang. Small boomerangs that have the same energy usage as the Metal Blades, but they have less range and they have a smaller hitbox. They're actually pretty powerful too for such small little things. Once you defeat all 8 Robot Masters, you're immediately thrown into Dr. Wily's Fortress, which you're forced to go to anyway because you can't revisit a Robot Master stage once you beat it for some reason. As if that wasn't bad enough, you're also subjected to the worst sound effect on the NES ever! Ah, it's like nails scraping repeatedly on a chalkboard and then made 8-bit! Anyway, when we enter the first Wily stage, we hear something this stage is particularly known for. I didn't mention this before, but the Mega Man games have some of the best soundtracks when it comes to video games. True story, when I was in my sophomore year of high school, I got an MP3 player for Christmas, and I put pretty much every Mega Man song I could fit onto that thing, and I played it while I was in school. Got in trouble a couple of times for it, don't care, still worth it. What's amazing, however, is that the franchise has never had one specific composer like Nobuo Uematsu for Final Fantasy, or Koji Kondo for Mario and Zelda. Instead, each game in the classic series has someone different at the composer position. For example, The original game's composer was Manami Matsume, who also helped make a small portion of Airman's theme. This time, however, the songs were composed by Takashi Tateishi, who does a fantastic job with them. You might be wondering why you've never heard of the names of these people, and that's because each game, or at least the NES games, credits everyone with either shortened names or pseudonyms, with each one seeming to change in each game. Getting back to the actual gameplay, this is where all your support tools come in handy as you bust into Wily's castle. In the process, you'll come across squirms, which were in Airman and Quickman stages, but are far more prevalent here. They constantly respawn until you destroy their spawner, but it and the squirms themselves can both be destroyed very easily by the Metal Blade. Right here is a part of the stage that's a bit of a pain. You have to use item 1 to get to the next ladder, but you have to use it from the lower ladder or else you'll get too high and not far enough left. Once you're on the top, you have to do some tricky platforming along these blocks to the right as— oh crap, it's a dragon, run for your life! This is the Mecha Dragon, and it will be our boss for the stage. It's only got one attack, a fireball attack you can easily avoid. Even if you get knocked back, you can jump back up as long as you were on the upper platform. You can also get rid of it just by spamming the quick boomerang at it. And just like with the first game, once you beat one stage, you move on to the next right away, though you at least get to see the map of the fortress first. Wily Stage 2 starts with you having to use item 2 to get across a bed of spikes. By the way, make sure you take the second ladder, because taking the first one causes you to miss some goodies you might want, and once you get to the room with the moles, you can't go back. I learned this from experience. The mole room is really the only horizontal movement the stage will give you after you use item 2. The rest are just drops of faith that you need to make. Pro tip for the moles: they don't spawn right on top of or below you, so if you just stand still and rapid fire your arm cannon, you can start farming for health and ammo. The boss is pretty easy. It spawns a bunch of little minions by combining into 2 parts from the wall. Just be careful when you step and spam the Metal Blade and you'll be good to go. Wily Stage 3 is just a bunch of nothingness, with the only memorable part being a trek through some pretty contaminated looking water, as well as jumping over a pit that a giant fish leaps out of! The boss is the Gutsdozer, a tank with what looks like Gutsman's torso and up attached to it. This is the first of many bosses that are either inspired by Gutsman or use him as a base. And for the life of me, I can't tell you why Gutsman is such an inspiration for the creators or for Wily. Anyway, just jump on the platform and spam the quick boomerang at it until it's destroyed. It's too bad the quick boomerang is in the same game as the Metal Blade, because the quick boomerang can be just as good. It's an underappreciated weapon, to be honest. Then again, those two are really the only good weapons in the game, even if some of the weapons are decent utility tools. Moving on to Wily Stage 4... yeah, I hate this level, though it's mostly because of the boss. We'll get to it later. The first part of the level has a bunch of fake floors that you have to navigate around. They're not really bad, except for the section over spikes, but you can use the bubble lead to find fake floors, since it will run along the ground until it comes across a gap. Or, if you happen to have a really good memory, you can remember where the fake floors are and not deal with them. The second half of the stage features the Crashman platforms, but this time made so much worse since they actively are positioned to try and kill you by knocking you into spikes. Also, the first and third tracks have tellies that spawn, but you can get rid of them by just using the leaf shield and standing still until you need to jump as they run into your shield. The final stretch before the boss has a bunch of returning Sniper Joes, some of which are out of their armor. Moving on, it's time to present the award for Worst NES Boss Ever! And the award goes to the boss of Wily Stage 4, the Bewbeam Trap. Oh dear god, where do I begin with this thing? Okay, first of all, this boss is only able to be damaged by one weapon, the Crash Bomber. Remember how I said that the Crash Bomber only has 7 shots? This is the thing that teaches you that lesson. There are 5 Bewbeams in total, but 2 are hidden behind these walls that you need the Crash Bomber to destroy. If you miss even a single shot, you have to let this thing kill you, and then farm for ammo before you can take the Bewbeam Trap on again. But you also need to have ammo for item 1 and item 3 as well, because that's the only way to get around. Now, you can destroy this wall and this Bewbeam Trap with the same bomb if you're careful, but this thing will be constantly attacking you, and it's not really worth it. Speaking of attacks from this thing, it's almost impossible to dodge the attacks this thing pelts at you, because its attacks come quick, and they're strong, so you might just die from this thing pelting you from every direction. Oh, and one last thing, and I have to say I'm glad this isn't a thing in the later games. If you lose all of your lives at any point in this game, you lose all of your E-Tanks as well. And there's only one E-Tank in this stage, so that means one E-Tank to use against either the Beam Trap or one of the later bosses. When we finally get through this boss, we're then brought to Wily Stage 5, where we're put in the middle of a room of teleporters, and each one takes us to the rematch room of one of the Robot Masters. Here's a funny thing that pretty much everyone knows about. Metal Man plus Metal Blades equals quick death for him. You know, Dr. Wily's first set of robots that he made on his own kinda suck when you think about it. He made a robot out of wood that's highly flammable, a robot that dies to his own weapon, an aquatic robot master that can barely swim, and Heat Man. And yes, I know the YouTuber who I referenced stated Crash Man and not Heat Man, but I honestly think Heat Man's worse. Anyway, another change to the Robot Master rematches is that you actually get a large health pickup after you beat each one. When you finish beating all of them, one more teleporter opens up, and so you can use that one to fight Wily Machine number 2. Wily Machine 2, like its predecessor, has two forms. The first is weak to the Metal Blade, while the second is weak to the Crash Bomber. The same one we just used every shot of to take out the Beam Trap. Damn. Well, if you do get the Crash Bomber for the second one, you can perform the one Crash Bomb trick, where you fire a bomb at the Wily Machine in such a way that the explosion hits repeatedly and takes out the Wily Machine in one go. But even after that, we're still not done, as we then teleport to Wily Stage 6. Wily Stage 6 is just a hallway with some jumps you have to make and a bunch of acid drips that try to damage you. Go through the door at the end and you find the biggest twist of the series. Wily is actually an alien! While in this form, Wily is actually completely immune to every attack in your arsenal except for the Bubble Lead. In fact, hitting Wily with anything other than Bubble Lead will fully heal him. And if you touch him, you take a ton of damage. But after enough of a beating, Wily is defeated. So, Wily once again begs for mercy, and we end the game with Mega Man walking home, and then credits. So, overall, Mega Man 2 is a good game. Not great, but definitely good. I don't think it's the best of the classic games, but it's definitely up there. The thing with Mega Man 2 is that it's got all the elements of a good game, but it's also got several things holding it back. Most of the weapons aren't really that useful besides for fighting bosses. The way E-Tanks are handled is interesting, but annoying and frustrating once you actually need them, and the game's Robot Masters tend to be just okay. That being said, Metal Man and Quick Man are obvious standouts, even if the Metal Man stage and fight are laughably easy, and Quick Man's stage and fight are hair-tearingly difficult. The level design is really good, and while some of the stages have frustrating moments, every stage, save for Quick Man's and Heat Man's, feels fair, even if they vary wildly in difficulties. Still, these are the most iconic lineup of Robot Masters besides maybe the Mega Man 1 lineup, so that's at least something. The game has been re-released on several different consoles, and while you can get the game in the same places as the original Mega Man 2 has the distinct honor of being put on the NES Mini. And of course, there was an obvious difference in sales from the first game in this one, being one of the few games to avoid suffering from Famicom sequel syndrome. With new promise to this series, Capcom was far more willing to give it a second chance. How well would that do for the franchise? Well, we'll find out tomorrow as we go sliding into Mega Man 3.
Seems like it's my turn to join the fray.